We're live. Good morning. You've met Magnus, have you? So, welcome back. I want to talk to you today about our stories and our boundaries. And I thought it would be really funny to give you two stories in one. Good morning, Charles. So, this is two stories in one. Actually, it's three stories in one, because obviously, here I am and I'm doing a YouTube video. However, I'm also channeling mom because, well, oh, look, rubber glove, and I'm dancing with my ancestors. I know, it's crazy, isn't it? So, a couple of things have happened in the last few days to everyone, not the least of which is Hurricane Ian, who has made things very difficult and very unhappy and very tragic for a lot of people. And the story that we are telling ourselves about storms is that they destroy everything. They leave chaos in their path, and they do. However, there is another way to look at that story. And I'm not diminishing any of the tragic, horrible things that have happened. Many years ago, when I was doing morning drive radio, which meant getting up at what time is it to get to the studio, I had an opportunity. It was wonderful because it was morning drive. We got to interview a lot of people who would come to Ottawa. And one day we got to interview Dr. David Suzuki, who is world famous for his take on our role and responsibilities on our planet. And he said something very profound. I don't think I was able to really grasp the wisdom. Well, good morning, Billy. I'm just talking about David Suzuki, Dr. David Suzuki. He came to Ottawa promoting, I think it was a new book or a program he was going to be doing, a set of lectures. And so there we were at, what time is it? And he had to get up even earlier than I did because he was on a junket that day, on a tour, talking to everybody. And he was talking about climate change and what we can do and what we should do. And I said something about, you'd think that we would pay more attention because it's a disaster. And he said the most profound thing. He said, natural disasters are only disastrous to human beings. And I stared at him, and we're on air, I can't, fortunately it wasn't video because I'm sure my face at that hour, but I had to kind of think about how I was going to respond to that. And I said, well, but people die and things are destroyed. And he said, it's a natural evolution that things grow and die. There have always been forest fires. They in the long term, they create new forest growth. We have chosen to see these things as terrible. They are only terrible to us if we tell ourselves the story that way. If we want to help the planet ease along, we could do more positive, thoughtful things. Now that's my memory. That's my story of the conversation. That's how I remember it. It's years ago now. Goodness gracious, it's forever ago now. I've never forgotten the power of what he said. I've never forgotten the wake-up call he provided. Whether or not I got it right, whether or not I read it correctly, heard him properly, what I took away has had a big impact on the things I see and the way I react to people and what they do. and how it feels right now, today. It's only a disaster. It's like with Hurricane Katrina, it destroyed the Mississippi Gulf Coast, but we came back better. Yes, Charles, exactly. It destroyed what people had built along the coast. And then nature looked after itself, as it does, as it always has. So I began, I think, even then, to realize that the filters we look through, the stories that we have been told since we were born, become filters that we see the world through. No two people see the world the same way. If I'm here, I see it this way through these filters. But if I scooch my chair over here, I'm going to see it differently. If I scooch it over here, I see something else. All of the choices we make are based on the things that we see right now. And they are flavored by, filtered by the stories that we've been told for as long as we can remember. And the thing I want to talk about today is the things we say that create the momentum. You know that image, that little tiny you kick a small little stone, and it rolls along and then dislodges something else, and all of a sudden you have an avalanche, just because of boop. Those are the ripple effects. It's the ripple effect that I talk about with fame. It's the ripple effect that I talk about with our decisions, with the choices that we make, with the people we connect with, the things we do. Everything has a ripple effect. And if we choose to believe a story that holds us back, that holds us hostage, Billy doesn't like it when I use the word hostage. If it limits us, if we allow that story to limit us, then that was our decision. Because the story is only the story told by someone, because they were told by someone, because they were told by someone. And I don't know if you've ever played that game. I think it's called telephone. You sit in a circle, and the first person whispers a short sentence to the next person, and then they turn around and whisper it, and it goes all the way around the circle. And by the time it comes back to you, the short sentence that's whispered to you is nothing relating, nothing like the thing you started with, because everybody adds something, whether they know they're doing it or not. They add their own little angle, they add their perspective, their point of view, their filter. They add something without even realizing it. So it's not that people are lying. It's not that it isn't what they believe to be true. It's that everything becomes altered in the telling. And stories do that. And one of the things that I think is really important for us, for all of us, is coming to terms with that. And Ellie and I were talking the other day about the best possible picture for the cover of Pivotry in Motion. And the one we've come up with, he suggested, and I kind of blinked and said, oh my God, yes. And the thing is, the picture, I've had it for a very long time, and it was sitting right in front of me. I knew it, why it was great and why it was exactly right. But it took somebody over there with a different perspective. I'm sorry, I just have a little hair there. To remind me of my intention when I initially used the picture for its original purpose. And this is also a ripple effect. We don't tell our stories alone. Our stories are the product of the interactions we have with more than one point of view. Stories are how we build our connections and our tribes. They are the way we make our people like us do things like this known to everyone in the group. So that's a survival mechanism. And human beings have taken it to a thrival mechanism because it has allowed us to invent things and update stories, new and improved, add new characters, bring in special effects, jazz hands, marching bands, feather boas, dancing Vikings. The stories are always about us. Always. We can't tell a story. We can't write about a story about something we don't know. We can give it different names, and we can put it on the planet Og, and we can make people have 3 heads and 14 hands, but it's still innately something we experienced on some level in some way that we're writing about, that we're sharing with the world. So the stories we tell are the key to understanding us. So here's the interesting thing about the concept of pivotry, and calling it pivotry in motion is we're alive. If we're alive, we're in motion. Everything's always moving. We're in motion. Pivotry in motion is how we transform from one to another version of us. How we get there, the actual technique, is a pivot. The pivot is not physical. The pivot, the essence, the core of pivotry, is that it's a mindset. And we, in order to pivot, in order to transform, in order to update the story, in order to make it work for us, to bring it forward, we perform something extraordinary. We literally perform a 180-degree about face in our mindset. What we saw and accepted and lived with, we say, I don't think so. Boop. And we do it like that. We do it like that as soon as we're ready. As soon as someone gives us the touch, that little stone, dislodge the stone, trigger something, it wakes us up. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today were the boundaries we impose. Because the fact is, when we impose them, most of us do it the wrong way. Most of us believe that a boundary is about other people. A boundary, we think, is something we had to set because they did something that we didn't like. They broke our rules. They betrayed us. They need to be punished, tossed aside. That's how most of us regard our boundaries. So here's the weird thing. If that's what our boundary is for, why is it all about them? Our boundaries. Shouldn't they be about us? Shouldn't they be something that benefits us? Why are we investing all that time in order to school other people, in order to police other people, punish other people? How is it our boundary if we're doing that? If I'm here and I have a feather boa, why is it all about them? We do that because that's the story we were told. We were told that that's what our boundary is for, to protect us from them, to teach them, to scold them. No, it isn't. That's their problem. That's when you decide you want to grow up and be a policeman, and you want to look and a judge, and you want to do that, and you then want to police all those people. That's that. There's, God bless all the people who choose to take on those jobs. No, our boundaries are the lanes we choose to run in. Our boundaries are the paths we choose to walk. If we're walking down a path and we see another path, it's our boundary. We can say, hey, let's go there for a while. We can do that. 180, off we go. A boundary isn't a limiter. It's a guide. It's a guide. You know, I don't know how many of you would be listening who ever took sewing. I took sewing in a class in high school called Home Economics, and it had about as much success as math class, because I didn't understand why I had to follow the lines on the patterns. I also didn't understand why I had to follow the recipes until I would eat the food and think, oh, okay, where's the recipe again? It didn't occur to me. And the reason it didn't occur to me that I should follow those things is that I didn't know who had written it down. I didn't know if they knew what they were talking about. Why would I take this perfectly good piece of material that I had to pay for and cut it up because who said so? Yeah, I know it's the pattern, but who, how do we know it worked? Could somebody show me that it worked before I cut up my stuff? And so I was a difficult student. Quelle surprise. Because I wanted to understand what the thinking was behind the boundaries that other people were setting. I wanted to understand, I wanted to have the context. I wanted to see how closely aligned those people were with me before I decided to believe what they were telling me. You know, if I lived in a society where we didn't believe the sun was going to come up tomorrow, then every morning would be a humongous surprise. Okay. Or if we believed it would always come up tomorrow and then, oops, eclipse. Terrifying. So I want to know what the theme, what the thinking, what the process is before I blindly follow. Because I have, in my childhood and in my teenage years, blindly followed a lot of people who said, don't you worry your pretty little head, you stick with me. And I would say, after it had gone horribly, horribly wrong, why did it go wrong this time? And quite often they would say, what do you mean? This is the first time I did it. You could have shared that with me. You could have asked. If you're saying, follow me, men, I'm assuming you've done it before. These are all little wake-up calls that we have that we don't really pay attention to because we we think that if somebody puts themselves forward, that they have a boundary, they have a set of rules, they have a pattern, they have a path, because they've been here before and they know the way that is the best in this situation. Not so. Lots of people just say, no, well, let's do this, and then tell everybody, yeah, we're going this way. My father used to take shortcuts that always took 4 times longer than the original path because he always wanted to see what's around that corner, which was fine unless we were, late. So the whole point of talking about boundaries and talking about pivotry in the way that I'm doing is to remind all of us, me included, every day I need to be reminded. I write it down and I still forget. that it's okay to try something differently. It's okay to change your mind. Just let everybody know so that we don't inconvenience people. This lovely woman who does amazing work with people, her name is Mandy Morris. She always says, when you make a plan, remind yourself, tell yourself that you want this plan to work for the greater good. It's not a woo-woo thing. It is for the best outcome for the most people. You can't please all the people all the time, but let's do this for the greatest good possible. And set that intention. And then when you move forward, just remember, okay, is everybody going to want to do this? Let's all go camping. I don't want to go camping. Oh, come on, Abby, it'll be fun. No, you don't understand. I've been camping. And much like golf, we are not simpatico, so I won't go camping. Well, now what are we going to do? Because we were kind of counting on you. Well, you should have maybe considered that when you thought camping, because do I look like I camp? We can only do for us. We can only plan for us. We can only organize for us because we're the only one in the room when we're making the plan. We always say in the theater, always remember and never forget, the audience did not attend the rehearsals. Not only do they not know their part, they didn't even know they had one. They've come in with their whole other intention, each and every one of them, because they didn't gather in the lobby and make a plan together. So if there's 500 people in the audience, you get 500 wild cards. Always remember and never forget. It may go well, and it may cause everyone on the stage who did attend the rehearsals the utmost damned astonishment. And then let me tell you the after party stories. Oh my God. Oh my God. So the pivot aspect in pivotry, the first pivot, the first 180-degree shift in our mindset is that we are allowed to pivot in the first place. We are allowed to change our minds. We are allowed to do something original. Why? Because it's our life. We want to do it for the greatest good. We don't want to kick everybody off the boat to find out what it's like to row alone. That's a little extreme. But we have permission. It's our life. If we're not comfortable, if the comfort zone has become uncomfortable, we're allowed to say, you know what? It's not working. It's not our fault that it's not working. Everything changes. It did work. Now it doesn't. Turning the page. Picking up the pen. Writing something new. We're allowed to do that. Why? Whoever said we weren't? It's our life. If you wake up and you're hungry, do you look at the clock and say, oh, I can't eat now? Or do you go get something to eat? You look at the clock and say, I can't eat now. You know what that is? That's a story somebody told you that you chose to believe in. I can't eat now because something. Your stomach is saying, yo, feed me. Why would you not do the thing that feels right? Based on what story? Whose story? And how did they come to that story? Every story that you have lived your life by was something way back, or maybe recently, that someone thought up and said, yeah, we'll go with that. So what our job is to ask why. We ask why a lot when we're kids. We keep asking why until somebody enough times tells us to stop. Why stop asking why? It's annoying. You look stupid. Well, you look dumber if you don't ask why and get it wrong. I don't want to look stupid. Too late. Have you looked at people? Have you just gone out of the house and sat at a crossroads and watched people for a couple hours? Everyone is doing something a little odd. You just have to watch them. I used to watch people all the time. Little kid, only child. We'd go to the beach and I'd sit there and watch people. Fascinated. When you're an only child, there's you and the two parents. There's no other people. I would watch them and I'd think, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that, Daddy? Mom, why are they doing that? Don't ask that, dear. Keep your voice down. Why? A couple of times I would escape the blanket on the beach and I'd go over and ask. My father and mother would come and get me. Why are you doing that? Why was I asking? Because I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand. I wanted to see how this fit together with that, right? Because I'd never seen it before. And I wanted to know what it was. All of our stories are fluid. They're based on a moment, an aha. But then that aha goes away and it's replaced by another one. Just in case Garen is watching. We have these ahas all the time. It's when one part of our brain bumps into the other part of the brain and says, oh, sorry. Oh, wait a minute. How long have you been standing there? We have these ahas all the time, and they shift our stories. And the ripples that we cause shift everybody else's stories. I went for a walk, and then you're not going to believe what happened. Your plan when you went for a walk was to go for a walk. But then along came a kangaroo, and you said to yourself, you know, you don't see a lot of kangaroos bouncing down the road here in Ontario in October. Wait till I tell everyone. Kangaroo's bouncing along. He's saying to himself, you know, this looks nothing like Australia. Nothing. Everyone has a story and everyone has a point of view. And we're allowed to change them. So I'm going to tell, I promised somebody this morning I was going to tell 2 stories. And one of them is in honor of Christine Shaken, who has this wonderful clothing store and the best stories of eccentric people coming in and asking her the most astonishing questions. So Christine, if you're listening, I used to do a lot of voice work. And there's a reason that I did a lot of voice work. 2, actually. One is that I sound like I have a kind and understanding and sympathetic and intelligent voice. And the other is that I read fairly well. It's a technique called sight. It sounds ridiculous. It's called sight reading. Because how else do you read? But what I'm capable of doing is reading a sort of like a sentence, half a sentence ahead of myself. And because I can do that, I make very few mistakes when I read, which is a great benefit to the recording studio because time is money. And if you make a mistake every 15 words or 6 words or 9 words, whatever it is, it takes longer because you have to start again. You have to gear back up. So I was in a recording session with a producer I'd never met before, middle-aged, from England. And I had been told that he tended to be opinionated. So I went in braced to do the best under a difficult circumstance. And I met the clients. And the producer was not merely opinionated. He was pushy and insulting, and he had no reason to be. He had no reason to be pushy and insulting the moment you walk in the door when he had booked you, really. However, I thought maybe he was having a bad day, and as it turned out, from all accounts, he tended to attack the world that way. In my later years, I now understand that that man was working on the basis of a story in which nothing had ever gone well, and therefore probably nothing ever would. And he was in a bad mood, kind of out of the starting gate. Good morning, Garen. And so I went in and I said hello, and he was rude, and I was early. I'm always early for a show. I'm late to lunch, but I'm always early for a show. So I was early, and I walked in, and he said, "What are you doing here? We don't start for another 15 minutes." And I said I didn't want to be late. And he said, "Oh, great. So I have to put up with you for 15 minutes." That kind of thing. That was the tone. And the clients were sitting there feeling very uncertain, because undoubtedly he had spoken to them in the same way. So we went into the studio, and he gave me the script, and he said, "I'm told that you think highly of your ability to work on a script you haven't seen before." And I said, "Well, that's not true. I don't think highly of my ability. I work very hard to do the best I can to meet the expectations of the producer and the client." And he said, "Right. So off you go. Don't dilly-dally, thing. So everyone in his orbit was being overwashed by this wave of blaming and pushing and so on. And I went in and I sat down, and it was a short commercial, so I read it, and the clients were smiling, and so I'm smiling back. And he said, "I don't know what you have to smile about. That was terrible. Now this is what I want you to do." And he told me, he picked up the script and he read it. And he said, "Do it exactly like that." And the clients were sitting behind him. That wasn't how they wanted it. And you could tell. So I tried to balance between him and what I could figure that they wanted. And he cut me off halfway through and he said, "You're not following the instructions. I'm the one in charge. Do it exactly this way." So I did it again. I did it closer to his take. And I don't know, 10 or 15 takes. And finally he said, "What?" And he actually became quite abusive. "What is wrong with you? Why can't you? What is stopping you? Is it your intelligence? Is it this preventing you from doing exactly as I said it? Exactly as I said it." And I said, "The only thing stopping me from doing it exactly as you said it is that I am not a middle-aged, opinionated male. I can't sound like that because I don't have that kind of voice. I don't read like that because I'm not middle-aged. And I'm not willing to do what you want when it's clearly not what they want." And he turned and he said, "I'm about to throw her out. Give me one reason to have her stay." And one of the clients, God bless them, said, "Because we like what she's doing." And he turned around and he said, "Fine, then do it. Just do it." And when I did it, and they nodded and they said they liked it, he said, "Fine, get out of my studio. Never come back." And I said, "Don't worry." Now, was he having a good day? No. Does he ever have good days? No. What's his story? I don't care. Why don't I care? Why don't I want to try and help? Because he doesn't want to be helped. He wants to live that way. Until he wants to change, until he wants to make that 180-degree mind shift, That's going to be his life. And the ripple effect is always going to be that. I have no idea what happened to him. I know one thing, I'm still here. And over the years, when I've gone into Christine Shaken's store, Justine's, Sussex Drive, beautiful. She has had every kind of person you can imagine come into her store. Every kind that you can imagine. It's a beautiful upscale store. She caters to a lot of middle management, senior management, CEOs. She brings in those kinds of fashions for that clientele. That's her niche. And she's got an incredible eye for fashion, and she's fabulous to work with, to deal with. She's just a lovely human being. And I've known her a long time, obviously. And she has these stories. She has had people come in complaining loudly that she needs to have more discount clothes, so she's never going to succeed. She's had people want to try on things, and she's realized that they're just wasting her time. And she has found a way to be gracious. But then afterwards, we go and have a glass of wine and talk about it. And we laugh and laugh and laugh, because those people and those stories become our entertainment. The disasters that I go through become our entertainment, because we turn the demons into stories that we survived. And together, when we're sharing those stories, we are thriving. We are not allowing ourselves to be capsized by the ripples of all that crazy stuff. We turn 180 degrees and shift our mindsets and carry on our path. So that's one of the stories. The other one I wanted to share. In the 10th grade, I had not yet understood how to enjoy history. I was still at a place where history was a bunch of dry, dusty dates and names that I couldn't pronounce in countries I'd never been to, and really probably couldn't find on a map back then. They didn't have any relevance to me because I didn't understand the connections. And in the 10th grade, I had a teacher who was lovely. He was funny, he listened, he teased. He made history something bearable for someone like me, someone who wasn't, obsessive compulsive about knowing where every little thing is and knowing all the deep. I wasn't there. He, however, gave me a reason to care, that when he asked, I could and would and did show up, because he was a really nice person. And I respected him and I appreciated him. So it was exam time. And the question that was worth the most marks on the exam was this: discuss the major events of the Third Peloponnesian War. Okay, so here's the thing. I read that question and I said to myself, that word Peloponnesian looks really familiar. But I don't know why. Whatever that whole section of the learning curve was, just, and I had retained none of it. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, that's a lot of marks. That's a lot of marks. I'm going to fail this exam. I can't. And not only am I going to fail the exam, because I have no idea. I have no idea what it means. Third? You mean there were two others? Were there any after that? No clue. He wanted to know the major events of the Third War, presumably based on things that happened in the first two. And so I felt terrible. I felt terrible for me first because, but then I immediately felt terrible for him because he was such a nice man. And he genuinely enjoyed teaching. People genuinely liked him. I genuinely liked him, and he quite enjoyed me. He was quite entertained by me. So here's what I did. I wrote him a short story. I didn't want him to get my paper and turn to the third or fourth page or whatever it was and find nothing there, because that would be devastating. If I were a teacher and I had a student that I quite enjoyed and there was nothing, I would think something had gone horribly wrong, and I would feel terrible. So I didn't want him to feel terrible. This is my take. This is my filter, right? I'm worried about him. So I said this. I wrote this. Dear sir, I have no memory of anything connected to any wars in Peloponnesia, and I am very sorry. I don't want you thinking that I just showed up and didn't pay attention and don't care. So I'm writing for you a short story about a gray squirrel named Charlie. And I proceeded to write a short story that out of my head just came out about this clumsy gray squirrel who had a lot of trouble coping because he couldn't remember where he'd left things, and he dropped things, and he had a lousy sense of direction. And just this was a challenged gray squirrel, but a hopeful gray squirrel, much like myself, really, without the gray aspect. So I wrote this story. And at the end, I said, thank you very much. And again, I'm very sorry. I handed in my notes. The thing is, and there goes time, and I handed it in. And I tried to look kind and puppy-like to him, and he just smiled and nodded at me. But I was handing it in, trying to make it okay. He had no idea what was wrong with me, of course. So time passes, and it's the following week, and we go into history class, and I'm dreading it because I was certain that I had failed my grade worse, that I had failed him. I had failed his expectation. And I was like 100,000 reasons why I didn't feel good. I went and I sat down. I sat at the back, and I was nervous. And he talked about the exam, and he talked about the fact that it had been challenging for a lot of students, and that gave me some hope. And then he did this thing which annoys every student in every class. I don't know why teachers do this, except I suppose it's easier to illustrate that there can be hope, except that what it usually does is it pisses everybody off. He said, I'm going to ask John, I don't know what the kid's name was, I'm going to ask John to stand up and read his answer, because John got a perfect score on this answer. So immediately everybody hates John for this answer. They're hoping that he failed miserably on all the others so that he's at least human, right? So John stands up and reads the answer, and I'm fascinated because I had never, to my conscious knowledge, heard any of this information before, and how interesting, sort of. And but it also made me feel terrible because, so thank God I hadn't tried to fake the answer, because in no way would I have come even remotely close to what the facts were. And then so John sat down, and the prof said, "Thank you, John. Well read, great answer. Thank you." And then he turned and he said, "Now, I'm also going to ask another student to stand up and read their answer." And so we're all sitting there thinking, "Oh God, how many?" And he said, "Abby, I'd like you to stand up and read your answer." And I said, "Pardon?" And he said, "I want you to stand up and read your answer." Now, I forgot to tell you something. When I got the paper back, I hadn't failed. He had said on the top, instead of where the grade goes, he'd said, "Turn to page 3, which is where, and I turned to page 3. And at the top of where I had written, he said, "I'm going to make you a deal." So I saw that. I didn't know what it meant. So sorry I hadn't mentioned it. So when he said, stand up, pardon? He said, turn to page 3. I turned to page 3 and I looked down on it. He said, here's the deal. Stand up and read your answer. And I said, doesn't a deal usually have 2 parts? And he said, mm-hmm. It's going to mean the difference between a pass and a fail. So I stood up and I read the answer. I started to read the answer and he said, no, read the letter to me first. And I read the whole thing and the kids were laughing. Everybody was laughing. He was grinning. I was mortified. And I read it, got to the end of the letter. And I looked at him and he said, read the answer. So I read the story of Charlie, the gray squirrel. And I got to the end. And he said, thank you. Sit down. And he said, I'm not telling you that what Abby did was the right thing to do. The right thing to do, given the rules, was to study and prepare because you knew there would be a test. Somewhere along the line, that didn't work out for Abby. It worked for many of you, and it certainly worked for John. This is the important thing I'm going to say to you. The people who fought in the Peloponnesian Wars were busy fighting. They weren't the ones who wrote the history of those wars. They were the ones fighting them. Their stories of those wars would be different than the history that we read today. The story is true from one point of view, and that's from the person who's telling it. Never forget that. Stories have many interpretations. Isn't that amazing? Was that not an incredible teacher to do that for me, to do that for all of us? So this is what I want to explain. That's my setup. I do long setups and then fairly smooth follow-throughs, I hope. A boundary isn't a limiter. A boundary is a doorway. A boundary is a path. If we don't like it, if people are trespassing, we choose what we want to do because we have no influence on anyone but us. We can't heal other people unless they wish to be healed. We can't fix other people's habits unless they want to fix them. And even then, we can't fix them. We can only help them, enable, encourage, support, cheer. We can only live our story. We can only tell our story. The people who told us a story are not the ones who get to say, well, you can't change that story. That's our story. I told that story to you. You can't change that story. Sure I can. Sure I can. You gave that story to me. It's my story. I can change my story. I won't change your story. I'll change my role in it. I'll live my life my way. I'll take my opportunity to make my 180 degree when it's time for me to have a better story and a different role and an outcome that works for me. That's what boundaries are. I was talking the other day about drawing a line in the sand. And I used to coach people and say, draw a heart-shaped line in the sand. And tell people that you will love them from afar. I used to say that so that people would understand that they can still care about people. They just don't have to have those people all over the things they want to do. You can love them from a distance and go on with your day. But I was still explaining the boundary wrong. I was drawing the heart shape and I was saying they're over there and creating a boundary. I was still explaining it in terms of the other people because I was trying to coach people the wrong way. The fact is this, and it's really important. If you pick up a pen and you draw a line, you know what that is? That's not a stop sign. It's the starting line. The race is about to begin. That's where you start. That's your boundary. It's not stopping you. It's saying, let's do this. We got this. Tally-ho. A boundary is the end of a chapter. It's what happens when you turn a page. You can't read the next chapter until you turn this page, because this was the last chapter. So you turn the page, there's the boundary. Now you're here. Now you're moving forward. That's a boundary. You said it. You were the one who said, I'm ready to turn the page. Isn't that amazing? That's who we are. We're going to run into people all the time who are not having a very nice day. And we have choices. And I want to talk to you about that very briefly because it's still part of the boundary things. You can tell when people are casting their shadow over your sunshine. You feel tight in the chest. You breathe shallow. Your jaw gets tight. You don't want them to do it. Every part of you is bracing for impact. The impact is not that they're going to hit you. The impact, you're bracing for is the ripples that are coming. Toxic, nasty, wet, messy. You're bracing for. When you have something happen that's funny and fun, you relax, you laugh, you lean in because the clouds are gone and the sun has come out and you want to be part of it. When I went grocery shopping last weekend, there were two guys working at the cash out. There was a young guy as a cashier and another young guy as the bag boy. And I said, "Ooh, do I have the 18?" And they started laughing and said, "That's right." And because they were laughing and joking with each other. And what do you think? This is great. I've wandered around 1,000 times trying to find something because they've moved things. I've got most of what I wanted. I'm there and I'm tired and I want to get the stuff in the car. And all of a sudden, these two guys, and they're having a great time. My day just went boom up. And the cashier at the checkout behind me said to this cashier, "You got a stapler? I need to borrow a stapler." And he said, "Yeah, sure." And he handed it to the bag boy, who then handed it to the cashier. And this guy said, "I don't know how many staples I have in it, though." And she said, "I just need to, they staple receipts and things together." I'm pushing things and saying, so how's your day? And he's saying, it's not bad. And how are you doing? And did you find everything you want? All of a sudden, the cashier says, here you go. And so the bag boy goes and gets it. And as he gets it and hands it to this cashier, my cashier, this cashier says, you have 2 staples left. He's holding the thing and he says, you counted them? And she said, well, there were only 2. And he said, yeah, but you counted the staples? And he said, who counts staples? And I said, he said, I know, but who does that? And he's laughing. And Kurt said, I just wanted you to know you needed to fill it because you only have 2. And he said, yeah, but okay. And he opened the stapler. He's looking in it. And he said, there's 2 staples. And he shook his head and he said, who counts staples? And I said, apparently you do now too. He looked at me. He said, it's like a disease. It's a virus. What is wrong? So there were now cashier, bag boy, other cashier, and customer laughing at something ridiculous and silly and small that had allowed him to shift out of one thing to another, allowed me to shift out of one thing to another, and everybody in the immediate surrounding, they're all looking over, trying to find out what's funny, who's laughing. There were a couple of people who looked, these people laughing at. Okay. We made a 180-degree mind shift from whatever that was to this. And we enjoyed the living daylights out of it. Why? Because we were laughing at human nature. Imperfect. And we were enjoying the hell out of it. Those are boundaries. I smiled all the way to my car. I smiled at everybody coming in. Why? That moment triggered my mind shift. We are never going to know when these triggers come. We're never going to know when all of a sudden a part of our brain says, we never see it coming. The really big ones, we never see coming. Those moments, those opportunities are an open door. We get to choose to keep going, ignore it, maybe lean as the avalanche goes by, or change directions and get out of Dodge, or lean in. We get to choose how we take part in what's going on, how we own the pen, what we do with it. One of the most interesting things that happened in my experience with You Can't Do That on Television was that I knew when it was going to end. It had a reboot. It had a brief resuscitation. But I knew when it was going to end because we saw the writing on the wall. It was obvious. One of the things that was a limiting factor on the show was the age of the kids. Our show was geared toward tweens, basically, kids between the age of at the youngest, 9 years old, 8, 9 years old. At the oldest, 14, 15. But the narrow target really was 10, 11, 12, 13. Kids in the in-between. Kids who had become old enough to notice the outside world and how our stories about us compared with the stories we were hearing and seeing from the outside. In that time period, also puberty, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so our show was geared for that group, for that audience of kids who really would benefit from seeing kids just like them, going through stuff just like them. They would be able to say, oh, good, so it's not just me. The world really is a little crazy. That's what it was for. So we eventually had a star. We had Christine McGlade, and she was our host. And everyone understood that Christine was a galvanizing force. And the deal was, we would naturally, logically know when the show was going to end, when Christine was too old. So we knew that the clock was ticking. At one point, along came another actor who had a very similar appeal, a very similar charisma, who audiences really gravitated to. Not exactly the same reasons as they gravitated to Christine, but for the personality they had and the confidence, and that was Alistair. When Alistair gradually came into his own, it was understood that we would keep going if Christine left, when Christine left, as long as we had Alistair. And then one day, Alistair was too old. So I knew, because of that, I knew that there was going to be an end to this show. And it allowed me to do something that I'd never taken the opportunity to do before. And that was to plan for what happens next, to try to figure out the direction I wanted to take. I'd never done it before. I had just done work until it was over and then said, now what? Ooh, what if? So I always started, not right back at zero, but I always started many steps back, because I had wanted to ride things out for as long as possible, because it was great. I had fun. It was great work. It was interesting work. It was challenging, and it paid well. Who wouldn't want to stay? With this show, I knew, and I also knew that I had to reinvent the way people saw me, because it was almost 10 years that people, in the larger sense, had only seen me one way. I had to give people permission to see me another way. And so I had been working on it for a couple of years. When the show ended, I was able to take action. And I'll tell you all about that another time. The point for today is for every one of us to remember that the stories we were told when we were young served us well. And then at one point, we walked out into the world. We went to kindergarten. We went to school. We went and had a sleepover. And on that day when we did that, we were told other stories. And it was up to us to figure out a way to make those stories fit. And when we did that, many of the new stories that we wove into the fabric of the old stories changed the story, because it became our story, not their story, not their story. The blend became our story. It became our new starting point. And without realizing it, we have done that our whole lives, from the time we first left home. What we haven't done, that I'm talking about now, is we haven't realized that we have permission to thank the people who told us their stories their way, thank them and say, I'll take it from here. Thank you. I got this. Relay race. I got this. I got the baton. I'm doing it my way. So many of us keep trying to do it the way it's always been done. We try to live inside that very small story that has no room for the new information. And it's painful. It's confusing. It makes us feel guilty. It makes us feel bad when we don't do it well, when we upset people. We've never taken the time to wonder if we were allowed to do this. We've never thought about it. So I'm thinking about it now. Pivotry in motion is how we transform, how we evolve our story, how we make it ours, how we have something new to bring to the table. So we don't always sit and eat same old, same old. We have that permission. Not only do we have that permission, we have the ability because we're fabulous. Now, before I start to sign off, I have to check some things here. All right. Charles says, I still love to watch You Can't Do That. It brings me back to my favorite memories, my happy place. One of them. Thank you, Charles. That's why we did it. Garen, 118 subscribers. I know. I can't. I'm so delighted. I'm so happy that people see the not so subtle hints. Want to subscribe? I'm so delighted they see the not so subtle hints. They go and check it out and they say, yeah, what the heck? Click. And it's building. Because the last time I checked, it was, well, yesterday it was 117. But 2 days before that, it was 110. It went from 110 to 117. I like that. How awesome. Now, Charles was saying we need to get to 200. I said, let's try for 150. And when we get there, we'll set our sights on 200. And so on. Okay. So that's part of our plan. That's part of our strategy. The other thing I want to say before I start to sign off is this. Vicarious was my first novel. It was the first book I wrote for me. All the other books I wrote for an external purpose, to achieve some goal, to be able to say, okay, I can add that to the list on the resume so that people say, oh, this, to help them choose me. I wrote Vicarious for me. I wrote it for me because I wanted to have an opportunity to tell a story that people would be able to take home with them and enjoy on their terms, however they like to read. I haven't recorded it yet, but I'm going to. And what I want to say about the title Vicarious is this. I chose it quite deliberately. I also did something very cool with every single character in the book. Every single character in the book is living vicariously through someone else, for someone else, on someone else's terms, toward someone else's agenda. Every one of them. I built it deliberately that way. And I did that because this was when I first understood, first began to realize that this was a conversation that we need to have with ourselves. Are you living for you? Are you allowing someone to live through you? Are you making your choices so that you thrive? Or are you making those choices because it's easier to let other people thrive? You have permission to say, wait, what? Are you living for you? Are you echoing the things other people used to say? Are you choosing the path they walked instead of forging your own? Are you living in the past, or are you living in the moment? Are you here with us today? Now that I've asked you those questions, I have a feeling you're going to enjoy listening to the audio version, the video audio version of Vicarious. You might even check it out on Amazon. Not that I'm pitching. Okay. It's time for me to wrap this up. How long have I been? Oh, goodness. It's been over an hour. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for thinking. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for being you. It's amazing. I am so grateful. It gives me someone to bounce my ideas with. Your comments before on the other platform give me ideas. Drop that stone that becomes a moving pebble and makes me say, oh, yeah, I think I'll talk about that today. So I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you're doing. And I know that each of us has stuff. I know that we all have things. And I know, because I do it, that you do this too. We look forward to something that allows us to step away from that, to enjoy, to disrupt whatever all that stuff was, and just spend some time the way we want to. And I am thrilled that it's me you choose to do that with on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Shoes days and Thursdays. So please tell your people to subscribe, comment, visit with me on the other platform. Be good to you. And hug your loved ones, maybe a little harder. This has been a challenging fall this year. Okay? And I will see you next time. Love spending time with you. Yes, your videos help me. Charles, the feeling is mutual. Thank you. All right. See you next time.